Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to conventioNOT. This time around, we want to introduce Amy Hoover. Amy is the Executive Vice President of Talent Zoo and the owner and co-founder of Strongbox West, which is a shared space co-working center in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to let Amy explain to you exactly what a shared space and kind of this newer concept that may not be as common to everyone, but the idea is you get a bunch of people under one roof with different skill sets, individual drives that can, in a perfect world, collaborate with one another. And I say perfect world somewhat facetiously because it takes someone like Amy to guide and nurture and facilitate the connections that are ultimately necessary to make that community a productive and sustainable one. Amy's a visionary. Her passion to me is infectious. She's someone you want on your side. Stay tuned, everybody. It's a great one.
To introduce you to, because I feel like Mike knows at least a decent amount about you, Amy. With all the nice things I say.
I read some stuff up. You're on the internet, Amy. I get around. You're searchable.
I get
around. I said I didn't know how many things, and one of the things I'm really excited about today for is like there's this whole other world aside from like our friendship about you, in which I know you're not like a big talk about self person, but you're pretty famous. And there's a lot of reasons, Mike, I told you a little bit of this, that people look up to Amy. And I'm hoping you feel comfortable enough to talk about some of those today.
I will do my best. I mean, I've got the liquid courage. No pressure.
I suppose pressure. Well, you know what? I saw on social media today that today is the 5-year anniversary of Strongbox West opening, right?
Just opening here. Today, this month is actually our 10-year anniversary of being in business. Today was 5 years that we got the keys to this building to start renovating and relocating everyone that was part of original Strongbox over here.
Okay.
Because we outgrew that location.
That was a big step though, right?
Oh, we had about 6,800 square feet there and we came into 48,000. So
that's what I thought I read something like quite a multiple.
It was more than we wanted, but it was the right deal in every other way. So just said, you know what, we've made crazier things work. So let's do it.
I think that Strongbox is responsible for me personally in like rejuvenating a lot of creativity that I honestly kind of lost a little bit of touch with working in software corporate land.
Yep.
In my
I love to hear that.
5 years here. My wife and I brought our business here just as we entered business together on like right at the very beginning of January. I think
it was the second week of January, maybe third, if that.
So just about that 5-year mark for us too. We were almost instantly friends, which is cool. For our guests that are listening, we're talking to Amy Hoover today from, I want to say Atlanta. I don't want to say Strongbox West or Talent Zoo. I know those are your things, but to me, Amy is a part of my Midwest replanted in Atlanta.
Because I have the same situation. I'm a Midwesterner replanted in Atlanta. So it was a good connection to make immediately.
We tend to find each other, eh? I've noticed that too. It doesn't matter where you are in Hawaii, I can meet people. And like by the end of a few sentences, I have a good idea if they're a lot different if they're from the Midwest versus if they're from the West Coast. You know, like you can definitely tell if people are from the Midwest usually.
I think we have a way about us. Yeah.
For sure. Well, and like I remember those times coming in and it was this weird kind of like upstart entrepreneurial thing. And I had a business that was already really successful as a sole proprietorship. And it was a traditional, like, quit your fucking job kind of a thing for us. And it was very nerve-wracking for all the reasons, right? Like, not just the financial part. I think that's probably a little bit of an introduction. I don't know. Do I need to say much more to our guests?
I'm biting my tongue, and you know how hard that is for me because there's a few things you guys touched on that I really want to dive into. Like, that stuff's really inspiring and exciting. And to be, if I don't mean to belittle anyone, but I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what you guys are talking about. This whole kind of urban revolution of these shared spaces and this kind of creative inspiration and the nurturing that you refer to. Honestly, it sounds like what you've been doing was on the forefront of some really kind of maybe more commonly seen things nowadays. But I'm really excited to kind of take it back a little bit because I know there was some scary steps along the way. And yeah, you're smiling today, so it must have been all right.
I can start by giving a quick overview of the concept of coworking, just in case someone's listening that isn't familiar. It's in essence, it's a large office building or space community where there are a lot of smaller businesses, freelancers, entrepreneurs, startups that are working under one roof together and have a lot of shared resources, everything from conference rooms and break rooms and coffee shops to resources, people that come in and talk about how to, get a better health insurance plan, those type of things. So it's similar to what some people may know as an incubator, where there are spaces that help you get funding for your company and then move out. We're not quite that. And it's become popular enough of a concept that it has gone corporate, so to speak.
Okay.
Strongbox West, our co-working space, is the largest independent co-working space in the Southeast, and we're the oldest in Atlanta.
Space-wise?
Yes, space-wise, yes. Okay. Again, that's not counting the corporate ones that come in and rent, 8 floors in a big office building and charge 14 times more per square foot than we do. Okay. It's just a different, more, I think, close to the original concept of what co-working was. They give people and companies an opportunity and a place to feel comfortable and grow, provide some resources, and everyone is more successful.
Well, nobody knew about this shit until came really on the scene.
Well, no one knew about co-working in Atlanta hardly before we opened Strongbox. That was 10 years ago. coders did. And that was our first client base of members were coders. Like they knew what's
bunch of dudes on laptops, basically
dudes on laptops banging out code.
Didn't mind sharing a bathroom.
Exactly. And a kitchen. And
so it smells pretty funky.
That's 100% what it was. Now, my background prior to co-working was being a recruiter and having a recruiting firm and a job board in the advertising and marketing industry. So I had resources to get in touch with those people locally in Atlanta. From the very beginning, I was able to use basically my other email list from the other business and blast all those people. And it was during the recession. There were a lot of people out of work that had gotten laid off, that were reinventing themselves, that didn't have anything to do during the day. So we brought in the creative community very quickly to coexist with these coders. And so you've got designers working with developers suddenly, or SEO and SEM people that can work with app developers and mobile. It brought a lot of people together that weren't normally together at that point. It was 2009. It was
well, a shared need, right? Yeah, a lot of need at that time. So any attention, a home, Yeah,
no. There were people reinventing themselves, honestly, that had gotten shoved out of the corporate world and didn't have a place to go, thought they wanted to do their own thing, were a little intimidated by it. So, we had everything from these young coders just out of Georgia Tech to these older people from the corporate world that didn't know anything from anything about, the tech world. And it was quite the experiment in anthropology as well.
I like that.
Watching all that shit come together.
The idea of telecommuting was still probably called telecommuting, meaning that it involved a telephone at that point in time, right? And
largely,
then all of a sudden the economy comes along the economy's rolling along in 2009. But then, as every year from 2009 to 2014 comes on, it just starts to collapse, right? So it's a little bit of a different environment. And I still think this is true. But at that point in time, 10 years ago, the idea of working remotely isn't really understood by people who don't work.
No, not at all. In fact,
that was very novel.
No, my business partner, Rick, and I, our other talent, we had just in early 2008 started to let people work remotely. We had a VoIP phone system, so they could plug it in anywhere. And these are recruiters, so these are people on the phone constantly. We needed to have. You should have seen our network closet because you had to VPN in to access the database. We had all your notes. It was just right before having everything in the cloud took off. So we had this server room that looked like a nightmare. Oh my God. And everything was it was quite the thing for our IT guy. For a 40-person company, we had a full-time IT guy to just manage the fact that we had all of that going on.
Well, 10 years ago is a decade in real time, but that's like fucking half of a lifetime in technology.
Oh, dude. Yeah. So Rick and I saw via being involved in the employment world for so long that progression coming along, that telecommuting and remote working was becoming a thing and would become a trend. And so it made a lot of sense to take the plunge and try the shared space thing and hope that we could draw people that were working like that because we saw it coming, through our lens of being in the world of people getting jobs and how they work. So
were most of your Talent Zoo team members local to Metro Atlanta?
Yes, all of them were at first.
So they were working remotely in a metropolitan area.
Yes, we had people. If you're not familiar with Atlanta, it's very sprawled, and there were people that would drive an hour and a half into the office today, hour and a half home, and they were great employees. They worked hard, and we were going to lose them if we didn't do something. And I'm like, I'm not going to lose one of our goddamn best people because she doesn't want to sit in traffic anymore. I don't blame her. I happened to buy a house 2 blocks from our office, so I didn't have to do that. I get it.
Right.
So like, let's do this. Let's start 2 days a week, see how it goes, and.
Well, like a lot of cities in Atlanta, I think once you start to make the jump into parenthood or you and your spouse want to make that jump into acquiring an asset, you have to go outside of the city in a lot of cases, depending on what your personal situation is. But in most cases, you adopt that hour and a half in the car. Yep.
And the time frame I'm talking about, that 2007, 2008, is when real estate was really expensive like it is now. And so you did have to go out if you wanted to buy your first house. It wasn't affordable in town. So, all of that aside, we saw this opportunity to bring people together that were starting to be fractured from their life, their professional community, their colleagues. Hey, come under one roof. Let's see how we do. Let's hope no one kills each other. And, don't clog the toilets. The business plan was kind of simple at that point. Like, let's just see what happens, man. We don't know. It's,
as long as you could pay the rent and as long as the internet was fast
exactly.
enough, it was amazing.
It was an experiment, and it took a lot of work, like any business does, but it kind of worked.
Let's talk about Talent Zoo, right? Because the shared space thing is easy to Google.
Yeah, I'm curious to go back to Talent Zoo.
If you haven't had an opportunity to work in a shared space, you probably want to.
No, you should. It's fun.
If you're watching some of the video footage on our YouTube today, we're recording inside of our bar that we invested in a few years ago. It's called The Dark Room. A couple of our episodes have been recorded here. So a lot of really cool things about that. One of the things that always intrigues me most about you is not only your forethought in the market, like you were predicting there, in providing someone who she has a reality 10 years ago, because we're just talking about that now, especially as it comes to, I think especially as it comes to the women and the way that we treat equality in the workplace, not just that equal is equal. But one of the things that was so cool is that how old were you when you started Talent Zoo?
Well, Rick, my business partner, started it on his own before I knew him, but I joined about a year and a half later.
Okay.
And then shortly thereafter that was the mini recession of 2001. So I'm talking like 96 through 2000.
You're picking up what I'm putting down then, because I wanted to go back just a little bit.
So I'm talking, we're talking late 90s. So that's maybe before some of you were born. I don't know. It freaks me out, but
it's not before either of us were born.
Well, no, none of us here, but maybe some people listening, which blows my mind. But so Rick founded a recruiting firm. Our clients were all ad agencies. He had worked in advertising, didn't want to work in that agency world anymore, wanted to have a business that was more sustainable. I don't know if anyone understands that working in advertising has a very short shelf life. If your name's not on the door by the time you're 40, good luck.
You mentioned the burnout of advertising, and I always offend Ryan when I share how little I know about advertising. But like, the only thing I know is I don't really want to be in that world because it seems exhausting.
It's exhausting, and it has a short shelf life. So Rick decided to do something different, but something familiar at the same time, create a business that catered to the industry that he already knew.
Smart.
And he was barely 30. Okay. And I was, I guess, in my late 20s when I joined. Yeah. And it just, after a couple of years, it clicked. And we ended up ultimately really building the business together after that. Growing it from 4 or 5 people to ultimately 40 plus between 2000 and 2008. 40 plus some interns, part-time people. We were really on that growth trajectory. It all came kind of crashing down at the end of 2000 when the labor market crashed. Okay. Obviously, there's not a lot of business for a headhunting recruiting firm when no one's hiring.
One of the first to go. Previous to that, though, that's the transition between really paper design and digital design.
Digital, yes. We bridged that as well.
Early pay-per-click ads, so as we started to think about what banner ads are, and Mike, even though you hate
if I'm gonna date myself here, when I first started recruiting, our resumes came in via fax. No one was emailing resumes at that point, let alone having an online. I mean, there weren't job boards even. It was. But it was at the very end of that and the very beginning of the next digital era. Right. So we saw the whole thing happen in that short span of time. And that's like you were saying, 5 years in technology is like 15 years in, regular life or other components of business. So we watched a lot of that happen and a lot of changes, and moved with the times, changed with the times. We had no dress code policy from the very beginning. We could wear shorts, t-shirts, jeans, whatever we wanted the entire time. It wasn't like there were casual Fridays.
These are new things. These are not things that.
It was, our policy was no Speedos. Like that was our dress code. Yeah. No Speedos.
Do the work, right? Like the rest is is
do
flexible,
the work. The rest is flexible. Done. Yep. Yeah. No, if you're going to see a client, different.
Yeah,
thing.
maybe your nice shorts.
Yeah. So we watched the business workplace evolve from something that we all remember being very corporate to something that's very not corporate at this point. Right. For a lot of us anyway.
Right.
I mean, that was a pretty productive, I'm not going to call it an internship, but like your kind of stance throughout all of that talent through growth. I mean, you're intimately connected with both sides of the job sector, right? I mean, so your understanding of what people who want jobs are looking for and what people who have jobs are looking for. I mean, that's
100%. No, you see both sides of it. Yeah.
You as a recruiter had intimate, unique knowledge of that, which, most of us don't get unless we go behind the glass door. Sorry, that was a really sad pun, but that perfectly led you into this world that you're now sharing. And I love the way you speak about it, Amy, because it's borderline philanthropic. Like the Strongbox is just this fostering, nurturing, beautiful plant. But you clearly have had a lot of success in your career. And you went into this knowing this is a need, this is where things are headed. And to me, I know that's like what a lot of real successful people do, but you jumped ahead before you knew it was going to work out.
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, the writing was on the wall. Something had to change. We preemptively, honestly, shut down the recruiting division of the business, which was the massive. It was where the big money was, but it was where the big money was not going to be. So it was scary. It was sad. It was emotional. Something that I'd worked on, like poured heart and soul into 10, 12, 14-hour days over and over and over.
For sure, the biggest part of your career.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And I was very invested in the brand. I still am, but it was, it was what I poured myself into. I wasn't married. I don't have kids. It was.
Yeah, it was your life.
It was my life. Yes, honestly. So it was emotionally tough. Like probably the toughest thing I ever had to do was say goodbye to what I had known as my identity, I guess, at that point,
Well, definitely your identity at that point, because I mean, so much of what your identity is as you build your career is what's around you. Especially if the family thing, like you mentioned, you don't have kids, and that's a whole other discussion. Not necessarily with you, but with anybody, right?
I
think a lot of people, when they look at folks who don't have children, they think it's easier, or it's a more smooth path or something like that. But the reality is not that. The reality
it's just different.
You have the same heart, and it's just different, right? You know, you're just as powerfully emotional. It's just maybe not the same way. And sometimes, I know in my case, it fucks with my identity, right? And being so closely related reputation wise to my spouse in our industry, like we are, it can, and it does create some challenges about, like, I'm so pre-programmed. I know the show isn't about me, so I'll make this quickly, but like, I'm so pre-programmed to dive back into the work because that's what makes me feel good, even if it's not going well.
Yeah.
That's what you're good at. That's what we love
it's what
to
you're
do.
good at, and it's what you know too. I mean, we're humans, and we have, things that make us comfortable, and we're creatures of comfort, and we like to go with what we know. Or, I mean, I know I do. Change freaks me out, sends me into a tailspin. I have to really work to squash that desire to just run away from change and think like, oh, no, everything will be fine if it's the same. Nothing needs to change. And that's just not reality. Change is always going to happen. It's just, what are you changing for? Why are you changing? How do you manage it?
So what happens then? Do you know when you sunset the division? I'm sure there's some time there and a couple bottles of wine in between where you think, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But was it a clear pivot into the shared space arena?
No,
Did you
not
try
at all.
selling
there was
Rodan Fields or whatever? How did you find that way?
There were scary months of not knowing what was going to happen. Now, we did still have the job board online recruiting division of Talent Zoo. So there was something there. But again, it was during the massive recession, and our niche industry, advertising and marketing, hiring was just dead. I mean, even if we're only charging a couple $100s for someone to, post the few jobs that were out there, there were still just a few jobs out there. So they were scary. I mean, it was scary. I'm not going to lie, but
you had a dip in the economy and a consolidation of market, right? Because it just doesn't take as many people to create digital ads as it does to create the more traditional, I'm just going to say magazine because I think it's easier to identify for listeners.
Sure.
Print, whatever.
The design or print marketing, it's just a different world.
Yeah, absolutely. And 60-second spots, just advertisers didn't have the budget for them anymore. And, magazine and print consumption was going down. People stopped buying print magazines and newspapers. That was going digital. So yes, you're right. It took, and it still takes far fewer people to create the same type of marketing and advertising campaigns for the same brands. It takes far fewer than it did 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. So all those things happening at once. Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, it was fucking scary,
Yeah. One of the things that appeals, and you undersell it. I know you do. And I got you on tape now underselling it, but it's true. And I think the people that are the most powerful are the ones that sometimes undersell it the most, because they get an opportunity to live it. And it's not so fun to talk about it when you get an opportunity to live it. And I know that those pivots are challenging. I'm fortunate enough to know Rick, who you're talking about here. I don't know if we could ever get Rick to come on the show or not, because it would be permanent record of some of his follies.
Yeah,
I found out recently that one of my other very close friends from Kent, Ohio, and Rick went to high school. So I've learned a few stories about Rick.
Rick's got stories.
If you can, or you listen to this, take a moment. And if you Google Amy, you'll see a little bit about Rick Myers.
Rick Myers, Myers.
There you go. You'll see a mugshot or two out there. So to take it back, like in between that time, right? So the bottom starts to fall out. Being from blue collar America, that's pre-heroin epidemic, pre-opioid challenge.
Yes.
However, everybody was losing their house, right? That was the time when I know I had this at this point in time. I purchased a home in 2006 and I have 2 loans. One of them is interest only. Really don't know, or I think for our transition, and we're similar age demographic, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We're just going along with what was advised of us. So what happens to you all? What happens to Talent Zoo? What happens, how does Strongbox
there's
come around?
40. Well, if I'm sorry, and I don't mean to drag you over this, but it's fair to talk about the transition. I mean, I know we're not talking weeks. It sounds more like months. There's a reduction from 40 plus employees. I mean, you talk about the emotional drain it had on you, and I don't want force you to go through that, but I mean, it's important for people to appreciate the difference between having a job and getting a new one and sunsetting a business that you basically grew from its inception, or at least were a big part of that growth, and then moving on, whether it's by choice or not. That is a transition that it's a very small percentage of human beings that ever go through such a significant transition in their entire life. I know that's a drastic statement, but this is on par with a divorce of a marriage. A lot of marriages don't last for 10 years. So
well, it was emotionally draining. There was some attrition naturally through some people moving on different jobs throughout the second half of 2008 that we never replaced because we could see it coming.
Okay.
And ironically, it was because we worked with clients at agencies all around the country. And a lot of what we were known for is we could poach people from other competitors and not necessarily in your market. So we dealt with a lot of relocations.
Okay.
Got it.
And it started to get to the point in 2007 where we identified the right candidate for something. They wanted the job. They couldn't sell their house. And so we saw it coming early because of that. We saw the markets where the housing economy or the housing market was tanking, and it started coming more and more and more. Well, but in hindsight, yes.
I mean, just the
in real time, it was just well, of course, that's
one little thing here.
That's Phoenix, everything was overbuilt in Phoenix. That's Miami or, sorry, but Detroit, Detroit's a big ad market. So we saw it there a lot.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so, as people maybe left for various reasons, we weren't replacing them, but no, about 2 weeks before Christmas of 2008, I had to let probably 15 to 20 people go with very little severance. Yeah. Just because it wasn't there, because it had been coming on for so long. And no one knew at that point how bad it was going to get because this was still 2008. And so, maybe. But the market had already crashed. Right. The stock market did its major crash at the end of September of 2008. Yes. I remember I was on vacation.
Instantaneous.
And my brother-in-law works in finance and investment. And we were both at our laptops one morning working. We were at a beach house. Our family was all together. And that was the day the stock market did its 20,000 point crash or whatever it was.
We're talking Goldman Sachs era.
And I looked over at him and I said, "How bad is this going to get?"
That ruined his that ruined a lot of vacation.
Yeah, no, you've got enough, morning beers. You can deal with anything, at that point. I think we dealt with it post vacation, but I remember looking at him and I was like, "Is this as bad as it looks like it's going to be?" And he just looked at me and shook his head and shrugged his shoulders. And we were like, "Okay, let's see where this takes us." And so long story short, we were hanging on as long as possible to see if it was just a blip on the radar, with no new revenue coming in, payroll coming out every 2 weeks. And it just got end to end. And it was pretty much the most horrible thing I think I probably ever had to do was spend that week telling people this is it. You can work on commission only if you want, but we can't keep paying benefits, salary. The runway ended, to put it in startup terms.
Times were bad. I mean, it wasn't just.
And they got worse.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, they got a lot worse through 2009 than they were at the end of 2008. I mean, it just kept getting worse. It was a strange time. And, we owned the building that housed Talent Zoo. And we were also sitting with a piece of real estate that didn't have a business in it with any revenue coming in with a mortgage to pay.
Double whammy.
And so, yeah, there were a lot of things brewing right then that were scary and nothing I would ever want to go through necessarily again. But having gone through it, I have this weird confidence that I could do it again. I feel like I've reinvented myself several times over the years, and that was one of the times. And so I don't know.
Is there a moment that you remember that was the first step of that reinvention? I mean, that's rock fucking bottom, right? There's an employee aspect of it, which without a doubt is your community.
Well, professional rock, but for the record, I mean, we haven't, unless you guys are, I mean, are there some other details I don't know about? Because
professional rock bottom.
Professional rock bottom.
Yeah,
okay.
no,
I mean,
we weren't huffing on the streets or anything like that. So
yeah, I mean, sorry, just I say it as a joke, but I do actually want to appreciate the time between January of 2009. Like, how many months were you not wanting to get out of bed? And I'm saying that figuratively, not literally.
Yeah,
but
I get what you
when
mean.
When did the sun come back up?
I have to give a shout out to my friend JT. So he's a friend of a friend. We actually knew each other. We didn't realize it from parties that we'd both attended several years before. Anyway, he's an IT professional, and he answered a Craigslist ad that I put up. We wanted to break down all of our Microsoft stuff and put everything in the cloud, like just get rid of all the servers. Like, I don't want a server room anymore. Like, let's do this cloud thing. Like, let's change from Outlook to Gmail. I'm doing air quotes for everyone that can't see that. It was just so new, such a new concept at the time to not have an Outlook server.
Hard to imagine, but yeah.
Yeah. So he saw the ad and replied to it. It's like, hey, I'm an IT guy. I can help you convert all of this. I can help you get in the cloud, get on, Google's, suite of things. So he comes over to the building, and at this point, the employees were all gone or virtual or remote. At that point, we had quite a few part-time remote people working on the website, the online component of Talent, but no one on site anymore. Big empty building. And so he sees this picture I have hanging on my wall of friends of mine from a party from, 1994, 5, 6. And he's in the picture with us.
Okay.
But I didn't know him at the time. Like, it was one of those pictures where it's like me and 3 of my friends, but like 10 other people in the picture.
Sure,
and I had it printed out like on my little cork board. And he was like, I'm in that picture. And I said, oh, yes, you are. Hey, we didn't meet that night. We ended up, anyway, weird story, off topic. But when he was there helping my request to let's get everything, servers out of here, cloud, let's go to the cloud, or like mid 2009. He said, you know what? You have a setup here in this building. You have like a door system. You have some, it's like, have you ever thought about co-working space for this building? And I said, no, because I don't know what that is. I have not thought of that. And I went and Googled it, what have you. And at that point, it turns out it was kind of an extension of jelly meetups. It was, it was a new evolution and something that had been brewing conceptually for a while of getting like-minded people together to work.
Was Jellies like a brand or something that was trying to kind of...
The idea of the concept, and it's been so long now, I can't even define it well, but...
Well, this was like a less formal Toastmaster.
Right? Would you say it like that? I don't even know. All right. Well, you Google while I keep talking.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's a good habit.
So, and I end up looking up, and there were already co-working places in San Francisco and Austin and New York and some of the other tech-heavy places.
Silicon Valley is real now. 2009.
Oh yeah. I mean, even not Denver, but Boulder. Boulder had a couple of them at the time too. Right. So there were some progressive cities that had a couple co-working places, and had very small group of coders that worked together under a banner. But that was, really not. I'm not sure if it was co-working, but anyway, there was
a bunch of guys splitting the rent.
Yeah, and there were like pizza boxes everywhere. Yeah. It was like a frat house kind of thing. No offense to y'all if you're hearing this, but
we're not.
Ryan and I are not.
Yeah. I look it up and I'm like, okay. And so we kind of got some branding ideas together, a quick nitty gritty marketing plan, and said, all right, let's try it. And there were a few people in the local neighborhood that we knew worked from home that that we knew because we both lived in the neighborhoods adjacent to the building. So we could plug into our networks locally. So a couple of our neighbors started just coming in there to work and setting up desks. And, we had some open houses, and it was really, in my mind, in my memory, Rick might think of it differently. In my memory, it was let's just roll this thing out and see what happens. We've got nothing to lose.
You're already vested. You were almost like vested in that space.
Yes. We wanted to, we went through this whole process of rebuying it back from the bank through that time too. So we had a lot going on to try to make sure that we just survived while not being in this total despair about the situation. We didn't, we kept our spirits high and, figured out what we needed to do here and there. And, just thought, I guess, we'll figure it out somehow. Mm-hmm. And I know that's no business book would ever tell you that's the way to approach anything, but it's just where I've come at this point. It's like, well, we always figure it out. So we're always going to keep figuring it out.
It's weird that no business book will say that, but almost every single fucking business story will say that point where you're like, we'll figure it out somehow.
Yeah, we'll figure this shit out. I don't know what it's going to look like, but
it's a personality type, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Midwesterner in me. I don't know what it is, but it's like, what? Done it before. We'll do it again. Even if it's something totally different, hell, whatever. It's something totally different, Yeah.
I wish you could see me, and I hope, Amy, you knew why my mouth was open most of that discussion, because I don't know. I've known a shared workspace and stuff, but the way you describe it, I get chills. It's so it sounds so, I keep using the word romantic, and again, that's a credit to you and how you discuss it. But I can't help but wonder, you as a businesswoman, those early days, and I hope this isn't offensive, but how did you convince your neighbors, this isn't a library? Y'all need to start
by being very clear early on what the plan was. It's like, hey,
you got to be upfront with people about something like that.
This is going to be a business, but you can, go ahead and work here now. Sure. We're paying the utility bills anyway. The internet's on, the lights are on. Come one, come all.
You're not only giving people a second chance, you're giving them a place to kind of do their thing and get back on their feet. But you're also maybe needing to educate along the way of not just them, but yourself.
I made that shit up as I went along, 100%. Yeah.
There wasn't any franchise model.
No, there was no model to go off of. The pricing, I just guessed. I'm like, I think people would pay this, and let's see how it goes. It was.
This is how all those utopian stories start out. Our shared interest is that we all have personal interests. Let's not pretend we're all here to pay Amy's rent. That's part of what we're all doing, but we can all help each other, and we're all getting what we need out of this. And again, Ryan, you did a good job of, it ain't about me at all, but I remember, I was in Toronto from 2006 to 2014. And I was in a big, 14, 15 story office building, and we had 60, 70 employees by the time it was done. And, towards the end there, the constant battle was to shrink our volume and the space we were consuming. We were right in downtown Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
And at some point, you don't need to be the numbers guy to sit there and go, holy shit, we're spending so much money on office space. I was one of the original people at my old company to really push for the remote opportunity. But again, that was for selfish reasons. That was just because I didn't want to put on pants. I wanted to sit on my couch and work all day. Right. But they were super cool about it. And it was the same, get your work done. You don't need to come in. You know what I mean? Answer your phone when we call, those sorts of things. And I feel like this has been very much not to be too grandiose about it, but a societal evolution. Where 20 years ago, if shared spaces existed, it was more niche, right? Like you said, I'm sure hackers 30 years ago were sharing garages, right?
Yeah.
I think co-studio is a popular thing.
You're right. Yeah, artists. Sure. This isn't a new, I think it's a new idea for certain types of professionals and certain types
I
of
don't know,
businesses,
kind of a white
right?
collar commune concept a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, I'm waiting for you to say this COMM word at least once. But
yeah, I mean, I usually end it with community and not commune,
Right.
but
Well,
there you go. That's a nice
when you were
one.
explaining that it does take a significant amount of tolerance as a business professional to introduce yourself to a co-working space like this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an Amex person, so I get access to WeWork when I travel, and I use WeWork when I travel, right? Like I go and I work there, and
what are you talking about?
WeWork is the largest real estate landholder, commercial landholder in the United States, but they're predicated on the idea that they're a shared space environment. And really what they did was they leveraged the market to buy a shit ton of real estate.
Well, lease it. I mean, they don't buy a lot. They mostly lease.
Yeah.
So I think that they are the largest leaseholding entity in many cities. I know London for certain. I just read that. So they're the largest, I guess, landlord leaseholding company.
Oh, they're international.
They did it.
Very international. Their biggest backer is SoftBank out of Japan. So they're very much a global thing.
I think they funded them for more than 10 billion. So like very much a leveraged environment.
Yeah.
But
propped up on smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I gather from what Ryan isn't saying that I don't need to ask any more questions.
This summer, there's some challenges
specifics.
with the CEO and a golden parachute and these kinds of things. But what I will say, because I know you got a point there, Mike, is that the dynamic between an independent shared environment and a space like WeWork is akin to an independent restaurant to Applebee's. Like it really, really is. It's a different type of environment. I get to work in some of those WeWorks. I don't eat at Applebee's very often anymore, thank God. But I do get to work in some of those WeWorks because I'm an American Express.
Why are you going to hate on Applebee's, Ryan?
I mean, I hear the millennials really dig it. I don't know.
Yeah, do they? Yeah.
So yeah, like what's WeWork? Like it's just more of like a chain.
Yeah, it's a large chain. Yes. Yeah. It's like the corporate version of something that used to be very scrappy and independent as a concept. And we keep that at Strongbox. Like we've had a pirate flag, a Jolly Roger hanging from the building from the first day that we opened. Like, that was just our attitude. It's like this scrappy band of pirates that are, here to make their way in whatever world they want to make their way in, whether it's in the creative side or the startup side, technology side, fashion side, marketing side. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Software, hardware.
It works its way through the culture of this place.
That gets me excited.
Part of that is setting it. Part of that is because the community sets the culture, just like it works in a lot of places. But when you look down the resume of some of the things that have happened here, not just in the last 5 years, but over time, some of the companies that have been built or funded out of here. So, a big part of the startup game, for those of our listeners who aren't familiar, if you're not an artisan, is to build a piece of technology, go get funding for it, and then blow it up and
grow and scale and
your version of a yacht is.
And then, sell it off to someone and make your millions. And
yeah. And
that's kind of the startup, the storied startup cycle.
Right. Silicon Valley, if you're an HBO fan type of a thing.
Yes.
And that does happen here. That happens here frequently.
Oh yeah, it does. Atlanta's a great market for it. And it's certainly happened here at Strongbox as well.
And we have that almost always at some point in time. Like right now, I know there's a company, their name is Buckle. I'm not going to go too big into Buckle, but they have started and been founded here and are moving on to their own. There's some other big companies over time.
Nice funding and significant growth opportunity to scale, and just blew out their space. And that's it's one of the things that co-working is here for as well. It's so flexible to do this. You can start with 3 people. Let's say you need to move to 10, and suddenly you're at 50, and then you've got the funding and you're going to hire 100 more people in the next 60 days. Well, guess what? You outgrew this space, but guess what? You're not in a lease.
One of the things I think that's so unique about this space in particular is those folks are here, right? The folks that are scaling, and sometimes they're not scaling. They lose their funding or they run out of money.
Yeah.
But the thing that anchors Strongbox in a unique way is the artisans who create, and I'm going to give a couple names out here because I think these are vendors that are worth Googling if you're somebody who appreciates artisan type materials. But for example, we have a jewelry studio here that's called, I think it's called a Piece of Star.
Pieces of Star.
Pieces of Star.
With 2 R's on the star.
It's a group of women who create fine jewelry, not not beads and things like this, like real fine jewelry.
They repurpose existing jewelry for the most part. So if you can come in with like your grandmother's, 14 karat gold, rings that aren't stylish enough for you, but you want them, they'll completely refabricate them into something new, and they design it themselves, and they hand do everything. It's a neat operation.
There's a coffee roaster here, which I think is also ultimately unique, that services the building. I'm not so sure that we could have a retail coffee shop here if they didn't have that ancillary business that they build.
No, they roast on site for their e-commerce business, which is their main business. And then they have a retail component here for everyone that works together at Strongbox.
And so those are the pieces I think that make this place a little bit more unique than a bunch of desks with an espresso machine.
Yeah, no, we've got makers, we've got, and the people that sell computers and everything in between. So I like that. I think our diversity is what makes us like a really cool place for people to want to work. And we're so laid back. It's just like be an adult, and I'm not going to say anything goes, but, do your thing, fly your freak flag. Like, we're not here to judge. No one's going to look at you strangely if you dress a certain way or act a certain way. And, we've got extroverts, we've got introverts, we've got older, we've got younger. We've probably got every part of the LGBTQ colored flag, on top of that.
That's true. Right.
There are a lot of women run businesses here, and a lot of minority run and own businesses here. And I'm really proud of that. I think that's really cool. I think it would be a real shame if there weren't a place like Strongbox in a city like Atlanta. Like that would be a really big void in the business ecosystem here.
Because for all of Atlanta's unity, and it has such a great marketing presence of unity, right? And those aren't my communities, so to speak, but I am very much involved and sympathetic and empathetic to those communities. Atlanta is a little bit manufactured in the way that it presents that type of equality. And probably a whole other episode, and maybe it's more of a panel with a bunch of us talking about stuff like that. But the reality is like that shit, it can be fake. And it's not fake in these areas. And Strongbox contributes to that. Strongbox is the only thing that contributes to that in Atlanta, but it's definitely a place where it's welcome. It's not just, those are two different things right now in the way we make this transition, I think, to equality, because separate but equal is not equal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Equal is equal. And I know that's something that's not only part of your foundation, because I know a little bit about you politically, like your heart is that way, but it's also something that you've committed your business to. And not everybody's so lucky to be able to do that, right?
Not everybody I think to me it's important. No, I have the opportunity to, set the tone and the framework and the foundation. I'm going to do it how I want, and that's how I feel about things. Like, hey, you're welcome here. And I would be flippant and say, as long as you can pay your rent. But honestly, we have given free space to charities, and, if there's a business that we know is really struggling, give them a break for a month or two, on the membership fees and dues, I'll do it. I'm not doing this to be the next Rockefeller. I'm doing it to obviously support myself. It's my business, but it makes me feel good, and I like to feel good. Yeah. So, there was one time, and this is one of the times, it's been a couple of years now, when I really felt like we started to know each other better than just being from the same area. There's a young man who was sleeping here, and he wasn't a homeless young man. He was a challenged young man. Yes.
And he kept showing up, and it was, it could have gone a different way a few times. And he took one of my favorite hoodies, which you know very well about. I still mourn for that thing. Other than losing my hoodie, and maybe a couple sodas out of my refrigerator, the way that you handled that young man ironed our friendship and my soul forever. Because I come from this really weird environment where you're supposed to be crass and rough, and this is how you show your conflict. And I know you do too. I know you do a little bit too. But the way that that you handle this young man, and it's not anything more than consciously asking the young kid to leave and not come back, and then reinforce him not coming back half a dozen times after that. Because again, he kept
showing up. I eventually, I put him in my car and gave him $20 and took him to the MARTA station. Found out that he had a place that he could go. He just didn't know how to get there. And you know what? I'll do that. I won't do that for everyone. If you come at me like a dick, then I'm going to tell you to fuck off. But,
Right. But part of creating the community is having that rigid warmth about somebody. And to me, that's something that I think gets missing a little bit in our world today. And I think that I'm curious about what's next. Okay. And I know that's not maybe something that you think about a lot, right? But as we get towards the end of the show, what's next? I mean, you shared a lot of stuff with us. I learn more about the people I know when we do these shows than like countless hours of drinking or dinners or whatever. And this is true today.
Yeah, these are intimate conversations.
It's easy to typecast that you're an entrepreneur and this is what you do and that's your life. But like when I ask you that question eye to eye and face to face, what is next? Like first there's the 16-year-old you. If you ask yourself, okay, now today, how is a 16-year-old? This is two questions, really, really long-winded as I do. Sorry. But the first question is like, how does just 16-year-old you feel about today? But then like, what does the today you think about what's next?
16-year-old me would have made some different choices along the road to get here. But like everyone likes to say, if it weren't for all the choices I made, I wouldn't be the person I am now. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I didn't always make things easy for myself. My mother will tell you that like, if there's a way for me to make something harder for myself, I'm going to find a way to find that way. I've tried to work on that a lot over the past 10 years. Like, don't be my own worst enemy. But so set that aside. As far as what's next, I don't know. I mean, there's a big changing landscape out there. We've talked about both being from the Midwest. I've had this idea of having a dual residency between Atlanta and Ohio, where my folks and my family are. Expanding Strongbox down here, maybe finally a few different locations, expanding it northward, mid-Atlantic possibly. I feel like I finally have the energy to do that again after several years of having no energy when we relocated here. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It sapped me for like 3 years. Yeah. The energy it took to get this physical location remodeled, running relatively efficiently and full and profitable and all of that. I mean, everything we do is bootstrapped, between me and Rick. There aren't investors. It's just us. So it's like once everything got running well and smoothly, like I just needed to take a year. And I mean, honestly, just like, just let things run on, not quite autopilot, but not be like, yeah, what's next? We're going like, just wanted to chill the hell out for a minute, just catch my breath and enjoy days that weren't 10 hours long anymore. And, and didn't involve coming in on the weekends all the time. I just wanted to come to the other side of that and, I don't know, reap a little bit of the rewards for years of, I mean, it's not like Talent Zoo was corporate, but it was different than this. Those were 8, 10, 12-hour days. We talked about 5 years ago. That involved like 2 years of long, 10, 12-hour days sometimes, and running in on the weekends because there was a plumbing problem and, whatever. So part of me just wants to sit back and be like, yeah, this works. Yeah. But I mean, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not in your nature.
No,
probably.
And there's the old adage, I don't agree with it 100%, but there's a nugget to it. It's like, if you're not growing, then you're shrinking. Like there's no such thing as standing still. In my opinion, that's slightly outdated way to look at things, because I think you can have a sustainable business, not like on an insane growth path that is still a good business and can be for the rest of your life.
Or you could be growing personally. Right. Your business could be staying and not shrinking, and you could be growing in other ways.
But so I don't know. I think
you can grow without consuming other things. I mean, I
think it's time for us to probably look at some expansions, throughout Atlanta, different markets. I've found the joy again in doing this, and it doesn't feel like a drag like it did for a minute. My apologies to Strongbox folks.
For what it's worth, I could tell that fire is back in you. Not that I ever I admit it. I was, not. I don't know. It just wasn't fun for a little bit, and that kind of sucked. It's a lot. It's a lot,
but it's fun again, and I enjoy coming here. Like some days I feel like a cop or a principal or a mom or a den mother, and that part is fun. And some days I feel like I'm an important businesswoman and part of the community of the city, not just Strongbox community, but Atlanta's business community, and that part's fun, and creating things is fun, and So, I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to retire early, but I'm not saying I'm ready yet either. So.
Yeah, you'd be bored.
It's funny how sometimes all those hats are comfortable and other times you just don't want to wear them all.
You know,
like it's same stuff. It's same stuff, just different.
I mean, when I realize
like,
I have to put a sign above a sink that says wash your dishes, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? Like, this is a waste of my brain power.
Other days you're like, well, I'm doing something. It needs done.
It is what it is. But then other days, I can have, really interesting conversations with someone on growing their business or, the landscape of, how Atlanta is going to evolve as, a startup community or, the role that women play in business. And
I listened to a show that you did recently with a shared friend of ours. And you talked a lot about like equality and salary. And so being a data nerd means the same thing on both sides of the equation. But your perspective, and I'll put a link to that in our show notes.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. Go out to that. But your perspective about equality, gender, I'm going to butcher this and I'm so sorry, but
okay.
Income equality across genders is really unique. And so I feel like you can't give that type of commentary unless you have that fire in your belly. And certainly you can't realistically give that type of commentary unless you have the experience in your resume. And most of the people who talk about that shit don't have it. And so to me, I think it's magical to be able to, and I see you doing it. I watch it happen. And sometimes it happens personally in some of the advice that you might give some of us here in part of this community, or I know that you do it a little bit publicly and maybe you do it more, but to me that I just hope that you continue to do that because it's really easy. We talk about this a lot on the show. It's really easy to find a documentary or a book that's written by Howard Schultz or Sarah Blakely, the Spanx person, who are these billionaires. It's really, really challenging sometimes to get a true story from somebody. And I don't ever want to encourage somebody from being the next Howard Schultz or creating a convention like what Sarah Blakely did. She's an Atlanta, Mike, is why I bring her up. But the reality is that and she's a billionaire and she's a billionaire because of her. But the reality is like not all of us have that chance and not all of us have that drive either. So to be able to talk to somebody and to be able to have an example of somebody who did it and continues to do it, bootstrap, look up and understand what that means, or who did it from a product that's just their own product if big business isn't your thing. Those stories aren't as prevalent. Those stories aren't as real. And it takes a little bit more listening when I'm not thinking about how you open 7,000 Starbucks across the world. And I'm thinking a little bit more about how you affect dozens of people week by week by week. And so.
Well, I have something I'm really curious to talk to you about because we talked about work, Amy, so much.
That's true.
And I know there's another really big part of your life. And Ryan and I also have these parts in our life. And I want to hear a little bit about Coleman. If you would be so kind.
Coleman the dog. Look up his hashtag on Instagram.
So you mentioned a little bit of balance. I'd love to hear just a little bit about non-work Amy. Sure. And like I said, I laid out Coleman there because I did want to put you on the spot because I know he's your guy. So please.
Well, my
share.
second favorite subject. Well, no, I would say my favorite subject to talk about is Coleman.
Yeah.
Coleman is my dachshund, my wiener dog.
He is a dachshund.
He's mostly dachshund. He's got a little chihuahua in him, and that's actually called a chiweenie.
Okay.
So.
Weenie.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So they interbreed frequently, I think, because of their size, probably. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Anyway,
it's a height thing.
I adopted Coleman 7 years ago now. And as Rick likes to say, who rescued who? It just came at a point in my life where he came to me at the right point all over my Instagram, Facebook. Like I said, he has his hashtag on Instagram, hashtag Coleman the dog. Someone's tried to hijack that recently with this like black lab kind of dog. So,
whoa.
Yeah, I know.
No.
So it's like a battle of using the hashtag, but I was the first one. Most of my posts are of him. So that's,
The world would rather, exactly, if I just turned mine into basically. Yeah,
I think my bias
dog,
is mostly pictures of hashtag Coleman the dog. So, yeah.
My dog is Whaler. He's sitting over there looking at me, kind of wondering who I'm talking to. Yeah. And
Coleman's upstairs in my office above us right now with the other dog I co-parent, Paloma. She's a beautiful white lab mix. So animals are super important to me.
I saw a bigger one.
No, I love animals. I have chickens. I have a cat. I've got the dogs. Like,
tell me how that chicken, what happened to its leg? Did you fix the chicken recently?
Yes. I came home from being out of town and there was a cut on my chicken's foot, like his leg.
So wait, you know your chickens well enough to have noticed a cut?
It was
he
bleeding. Yeah, no, it was totally
or?
Bleeding. So it was hard to miss, actually. Okay.
Gotcha.
I became farmer Amy for a minute. I don't know.
One of your many hats. One of your many hats.
I had zero plan. I was just like, well, let's see if this shit works. I don't know. Then cross your fingers and hope for the best. And it healed. So ta-da. Yeah. Betty lived to see another day.
And that chicken's still walking around, right?
Oh yeah, she's
you did
laying
good.
Eggs, doing her thing.
She's back to it.
She doesn't even limp. So there you go. I mean, I'm a super introvert. So when I go home, it's hard to get me back out of the house. I think I went out and honestly like clubbed and partied so much in my 20s that I'm just done. It's like what you want me to go out after 6:30 p.m.? Like Same. That's a nope, man. Right. Like no.
It better be a really good dinner.
Yeah. I'm content to be in my little house, my little dog with some wine and
does that count as us being introverted, or are we just getting a little older? Because you are not an introvert, Amy. No one has ever met you for 2 seconds and thought you were an introvert.
Depends on your definition of introvert. Like I replenish from being alone, like doing something like this and being on all the time and talking to people and remembering their names all around here and doing panels or talks or whatever. It drains me, and I get recharged from being by myself. And I know a lot of people who they get energized by doing the in-person interaction, like that's where they get their energy. And I'm the opposite of it. Now I can be on if I have to be, obviously for business or.
I guess I just think about social, like you seem very social, and that doesn't mean that I always like to say, I don't like to be instantaneously social. Like I love people, but it's kind of on
I can't stand to have plans. Like it's as soon as I make a plan, I'm instantly anxious about it and I dread it. And I'm thinking of the excuse to get out of it from the minute I commit.
Introverted and extrovert is easy to identify as like how you are. But I think the reality, like when you look internally, it's how you recharge. Like you're not an introvert or extrovert based on your behavior. It's based on how you choose to recharge. Because extrovert truly does take their payoff from being out and about. Introvert takes their payoff from being home.
It's the existence of my choosing. So it makes me happy. And that's all I care about at this point in my life. Like I'm done trying to make anyone else happy or present a persona or a lifestyle that's, rich with excitement. And, it's like, no, this is me. This is what I do. This is how I do it. And this is why I do it.
Unfortunately, some people may be foolishly chasing something else, but you've found what most of us are really looking for. And, I can tell just in your eyes, you're happy, you're content. And like, that doesn't mean you're chilling. It doesn't mean you're retired sitting on your yacht. You enjoy what you do. And we always say passion breeds success. And I can just tell that you're 100% at anything you do. And it's amazing to meet you, Amy. Like I'm serious. I was getting goosebumps, all that shared space stuff. Cool, like, man. Maybe I'm outdated or not in the loop. I looked it up. There's like a box jelly, like the name of the like big one here in Honolulu is called box jelly. So that I found what jelly means.
Cool. Anyways, next time Amy, we talk, we'll bring up the concept of imposter syndrome. And that's a whole other subject. I think a lot of people could talk about, myself included. So,
we have some pretty cool ideas about season 3. I don't want to share those here over the speaker, but it is something that we should talk about off air because we're really committed to creating journalism, I think, right? Like we realize that we're journalists.
We focused on guests, but I do think in the future, there'll be like some subject matter that we can kind of hone certain episodes around. And like, your firsthand experience, Amy. Ryan talked about it, but we didn't get you to expand upon just the inequality and equality issues you've experienced and that you continue to kind of implement in your daily. obviously too enormous of a conversation to squeeze into the end, but it's something I'd really love to expand on in the future. Ryan and I, embarrassingly, we acknowledge we've had quite a few guests to date, and Amy, we're very, very proud that you are our first female guest.
I thought I might have been, like, going through the past episodes.
Yeah.
It was not by design or intention. Hopefully that goes without saying. But the reality is it got pointed out to Ryan and I.
Oh, interesting.
And I think both of us, both of us were basically like, we're really sorry. We just, we're not there yet in our relation. Like, it was just our inadequacies, just like it typically is.
Well, I think it's important.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you.
It's important to talk about them because I know our listenership, because we get some statistics on it, it skews very much male. And I think there's a decent amount of people out there who really give a shit, as they should, about discussing these things. But it's not so easy, particularly this time of year, November we're in, when it gets to be this political climate thing, when, you want to talk a little bit about equality, but sometimes the only place you could talk about equality is at like a holiday table or at a work event or something like that.
And that can get dicey.
Get to happen.
Yeah, it's a thorny subject.
Yeah.
It is
now more than ever. But.
All right. Well, I've taken some notes here about what's going to come up next time. I do want to get towards the close of this so that we have a nice succinct episode. Not that folks wouldn't listen to you for several hours at a time, but we're going to cut them in.
I'm not that interesting.
Before we hang up,
we've trained her.
Right. Before we hang up here, how do we get a hold of you? What is the Strongbox? If I'm in Atlanta, I want to use Strongbox, or I would like to rent Strongbox for permanent place. How do we get a hold of you? How do we get in touch with your businesses?
Okay. The best way to get in touch with us for Strongbox is to launch it from the website, honestly, strongboxwest.com. There will be all the links there to get in touch with us. Phones, we don't really do phones. It's not our thing. We really funnel people to email so that we can have a record of the conversations and go back and realize what we've talked with, certain prospects or people about. But yeah, strongboxwest.com. Our Twitter and Instagram are both at strongboxwest. You can hit me up, Twitter, TZAmy. My Instagram is at Amy Hoover, just like it sounds, MYHOOVR. Talent Zoo is talentzoo.com, job board. If you're looking to hire anyone in advertising and marketing, that's where you should start, my humble opinion. And if there's any other way to get a hold of me, I don't want you to. So don't show up at my house. I'm going to be recharging.
I think those are ample ways to get a hold of you. In fact, it's cool to hear so many ways, because I think that the spice of life is having a well-rounded environment like that. So many people we talk to are happier because they have more things. So just real quickly, the conventioNOT demographics it's at conventioNOT_podcast on Instagram and Twitter. We keep it the same. We are now searching for reviews. So I've learned a little bit. Mike and I have been studying about how to become better podcasters. We've crossed our couple thousandth listeners now, which is great. That's a big deal for us.
Congratulations.
Especially, a couple seasons in. But one of the things I want to ask our listeners for today, because I recorded some commercials earlier, probably won't be on this episode, but will be on later episodes, is to go out to their podcast platform and review us. So on Apple, for example, we are a 5-star ranked podcast. We have about 15 or 20 reviews on there. So if you're listening to this and you dig us, forever and a day, we've asked you to subscribe. Please continue to subscribe, but take a minute to review us and tell us what you liked about the show. Mike and I'm sure this isn't a shocker to you, but we do read that stuff. We do care. We're also curious about content, and we'll continue to interview. We're blessed to have some great interviews. We've got Taylor Piedmonte coming up here pretty soon, who we've talked to before on different shows. We also have another female guest who is a similar entrepreneur in some similar ways. So I'm excited for both of them. I know that she will be listening to this episode because she was excited. Her name is Jen Leon. And so again, thanks for tuning in today. Please follow us. Please review us. Please subscribe to us. Please get out and follow Amy. Please do all the things on social media that we tell you not to do on every other episode, but do them for us. And with all of that said, really thank you so much, Amy, for coming on.
Thank you, Amy. Please say hello to Coleman from Whaler. And
I certainly will. You guys are great interviewers. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks again.